Every year I get the same question from buyers and sellers across all of North Carolina. Is now the right time or should I wait? And every year, the same people who wait pay for it. So let me tell you exactly what I'm seeing heading into 2026, what I'm telling my clients right now, and what's going to happen to prices, inventory, and interest rates. Because if you get this wrong, it could literally cost you tens of thousands of dollars. And I don't want that for you or frankly, anyone. So let's dive in. Where we are right now. The word I keep coming back to when I describe this market is accountable. Sellers are getting punished for things they used to get away with. Buyers aren't panicking anymore, and the market for the first time in years is actually working the way it was intended/should. If you sat down across from me today, here's exactly what I'd tell you. Typical homes in Winston-Salem are pricing anywhere in the mid to high 2s, low 3s, with days on market running somewhere in the 2-month frame, depending on the area and of course the price point. Now, new listings come on each week. Buyers absorb them at roughly a similar pace, and we stay at kind of a steady line. Doesn't feel like a crash, it doesn't feel like a frenzy, and it feels like, a real market. And if you were here during 2020 or all the way through 2022, you know how rare that actually is. Now, January through March specifically, inventory movement has been more gradual than some people expected. We haven't seen a huge surge of new listings, but buyer demand hasn't spiked either. So the balance has pretty much held. And when we get to who actually wins in this market right now, buyers or sellers, I think the answer is going to be more nuanced than people expect or maybe want. So stay with me. But first, let me tell you where prices are actually heading. Buyers who are prepared still need to move relatively succinctly. A well-priced home in a desirable area isn't sitting, but sellers who overprice or skip the necessary prep work are getting price cuts 60, 70, 90 days on market, and the market is holding both sides accountable in a way it simply didn't have for the last 3 years or so. And that's exactly how it's supposed to work. Right about now is when people usually ask me what this actually means for the specific situation they find themselves in. If you're thinking about buying or selling in Winston-Salem this year and you want a real conversation about where you stand, I work with buyers and sellers across the market all over North Carolina, and I'd love to help you figure out your next move. Shoot me a message. My contact information is in the description below. Now, back to the forecast. All right, so most people assume that the most expensive markets in North Carolina are the ones worth watching more closely in 2026. I push back on that pretty hard. Do I think prices go up, stay flat, or soften in Winston-Salem this year? Up modestly. Major forecasters are projecting somewhere around 3 to 4% annual home price growth in 2026, and I think Winston-Salem tracks pretty much in that range. Maybe slightly above it. I would be surprised if it were too much below it. Steady appreciation, not a crash, not a surge, just consistent, sustainable movement upward. But not all of Central North Carolina performs the same way. And that's where it gets interesting. I genuinely believe the more affordable mid-level cities in the region are going to outperform Raleigh or Charlotte on appreciation percentage this year. See, Charlotte and Raleigh have been the primary focus of new construction for the last several years, frankly, before COVID. Their inventory has climbed faster and their price points have stretched further, and affordability has hit a ceiling for a lot of buyers in those markets. Winston-Salem cost of living runs about 10 to sometimes 15% below the national average, and housing costs here are significantly below what you'd find in those cities. So that gap matters more right now than it has in a long time, because buyers who get priced out of these big metros have to go somewhere, and they're looking at the center of the state, and the Piedmont Triad Corridor sits in a really compelling position right now. Central location, growing healthcare and advanced manufacturing job bases, and significantly lower entry costs, well, than those major metros, are basically, frankly, on Central North Carolina's side. If you're comparing Winston-Salem to Raleigh or Charlotte on where appreciation goes this year, believe it or not, I'd take Winston. The affordability advantage here right now is the entire story. And the affordability picture connects directly to the conversation every buyer and seller is having right now, which is what's happening with interest rates. 6 months ago, buyers waiting on rates had a case. Like, not a great case, but a case. Today, that window has closed. Let me tell you what I'm telling every single client who comes to me saying they're holding out for rates to drop. You should have already gotten off the fence. Every credible forecast I'm looking at points to rates staying in the 6% range for the foreseeable future. Candidly, because of global situations, shall we say, I actually think rates could get closer to 7 than 5 for the second half of this year. See, Fannie Mae's projections have rates hovering in the mid to high 6s with a possible gradual glide towards the high 5s at best. However, that was before the Middle East situation. We're not going back to 3s, and we're definitely not going to be heading towards 4s anytime soon. That era, frankly, is gone, and waiting for it to return isn't a strategy I would recommend. It's just paying more for the same house later. Now, rates did dip below 6 for some buyers recently for the first time in quite some time. And that matters psychologically. But we're talking about 1/4 of a point or tops 3/8. On a $300,000 loan, that's maybe $50 a month. The house you want is going to cost more in 6 months than it costs today, and a $50 monthly savings doesn't actually offset the continued appreciation. On a rate buy-down or resale properties, that conversation has mostly left the room. I've got sellers asking about it when their homes aren't moving, but the answer is almost always the same. Pricing and condition are the play, not the rate buy-down. The one exception is some of the national builders. See, they have their own mortgage arms and can absorb losses on the financial side to move inventory. So a regular homeowner simply struggles to compete with that. So if you're buying new construction, ask about builder incentives. If you're buying a resale, focus on the fundamentals. Rates are the environment we're living in. The buyers who accept that and move are building equity. The ones waiting and watching appreciation happen to other people. And speaking of what's driving the appreciation, the inventory picture tells you exactly why this market isn't shifting anytime soon. What's happening with inventory right now is one of the more telling stories in this market, and it's not the story most people expect. See, we haven't seen this flood of new listings. We also haven't seen a sudden surge in buyers. What we've seen is a very consistent, almost methodical rhythm. Homes come on, qualified buyers absorb them, and supply stays relatively tight, or at worst, flat. Active listings in Winston-Salem have normalized somewhat compared to the pandemic lows, but we're still comfortably below that 4 to 6 month supply, which is what we call level. We've been hovering closer to that 3-month supply, which is technically a seller's market, even though it doesn't quite feel like one. Now, compare that to Charlotte or Raleigh. More new construction finishing up, more listings sitting longer, more price cuts on properties that stretched pricing assumptions. The big metros are giving buyer negotiations room in a way we really haven't seen in Winston-Salem as of yet. Their absorption rate is climbing because they're overbuilding, and there are fewer buyers in those price points. Here's where the inventory picture gets practical. A well-priced, well-prepared home in a desirable Winston-Salem area is still moving in weeks, typically less than 4. I've seen homes priced at the low 4s go in multiple offers and close above asking. In fact, I just had one this past week. What's not happening is those same homes selling with 20 or 25 or 30% over asking price. Those days, they're behind us. And sellers who are still operating from that playbook are finding out the hard way. Is new supply relieving pressure here? Not dramatically. Is demand absorbing everything instantly? Also no. It's leveling each other out in a measured, healthy way that supports continued, modest appreciation. Which brings us to the question I get more than any other right now. Who actually has the upper hand, buyers or sellers? If my best friend called me right now and asked me whether to buy or wait, the answer would be buy, without hesitation. On paper, Winston-Salem is still technically a seller's market. Months supply is low, below 4 months, technically closer to 3, and some below 3. Days on market are reasonable, and prices are slowly moving up. Those fundamentals technically favor sellers, but here's what's changed. It doesn't function like the seller's market that we were in for multiple years, basically from COVID until really 2025. You're getting inspection periods. You have time to think, hours/days, not weeks, and you can negotiate on condition. Sellers who don't price correctly are being punished, which gives buyers real leverage if they're patient and strategic about which homes they pursue. The biggest mistake I'm seeing buyers make right now is waiting for something the data simply doesn't support. A major price correction, a dramatic rate drop. Neither of those things are really showing up in any serious 2026 forecasts. Every month you wait, modest appreciation is adding to the price of the home you're going to buy anyway. For sellers, the biggest mistake is walking in with 2021 expectations. Sellers who prepared their homes well and priced strategically are doing great. Sellers who didn't address deferred maintenance, skipped the prep work, and threw a number on the wall based on what the market looked like several years ago are sitting, and they're cutting their prices and calling me after 60 days wondering what went wrong. Preparation and pricing. Those are the two levers sellers actually control right now. Pull both of them correctly and you are absolutely going to win in this market. And when you combine that with what I'm about to lay out in my personal predictions, the path forward actually becomes pretty clear. So here's the prediction most people won't see coming. The biggest story in Central North Carolina real estate by the end of 2026 isn't going to be a crash or boom. It's going to be how many people finally discover what's been sitting right in the middle of the state this entire time. My boldest call? We're going to be in basically the same spot a year from now. I know that doesn't sound dramatic, but stick with me because I think it actually is. Most people keep expecting this market to tip one way or another. A crash that wipes out equity, or a boom that brings back bidding wars, at 25% over asking. Well, neither of those things are coming. We don't have enough new construction to flood the market, and we don't have enough buyer demand to reignite those frenzies. What we have is a durable, stable, technical seller's market that functions like a healthy, balanced one. And I think that holds through the end of 2026. But here's the prediction I'm more fired up about. Mid-level cities in Central North Carolina are going to surprise people this year, and Winston-Salem sits right at the center of that story. See, North Carolina is consistently one of the top growth states in the country, and major employers are increasingly looking at the center of the state because the big metros have gotten, expensive. So the Triad sits right in the middle of everything. An hour from Charlotte, an hour and a half from Raleigh, 40 minutes from the mountains, 4 hours, technically 3 hours, 3.5 hours, depending on how fast you drive to the beach. The healthcare infrastructure is amazing, the universities are incredible, and that cost of living advantage isn't shrinking. If anything, it's maybe growing. Also, that's growing more relevant every year as Charlotte and Raleigh push further out of reach for a lot of buyers. I think by the end of this year, people who were only looking at Raleigh or Charlotte are going to turn their heads, and the buyers who move to Winston-Salem in the next 6 months are going to look back on that decision very well. The market doesn't reward people who wait for the perfect moment. It rewards people who understand what's happening right now. And right now, in 2026, Winston-Salem is in one of those rare moments where the signs are clear. The opportunity is real, and most people still aren't paying attention. If you want to talk through what the forecast means for you specifically, whether that's to buy or sell, and this year, any year, frankly, I'm not going anywhere, email me today. And if you're trying to figure out exactly where in Winston-Salem to put down roots, I've got a video linked right here where I walk through all the neighborhoods I'd personally choose if I were moving here in 2026. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.